Hey everybody, Misty Williams here with Healing Rosie, and I'm really excited for this interview today for a few different reasons. You guys know that my healing journey started in 2011 when I had an ovarian cyst that led to my ovary being removed, that led to an endometriosis diagnosis, that led to them finding nodules on my thyroid. And the first few years of my journey, one of the things that I discovered, and I know that you guys have discovered this too, is that the reason our bodies are breaking down and the reason that we're sick is due in large part to our very toxic environments. And the first probably 3 or 4 years, I don't even know how much money I spent. I probably don't want to know how much money I spent just cleaning out my environment, getting rid of all the synthetic rugs that were off-gassing in my house, getting rid of all the plastics that were in my kitchen and replacing them with glass, looking through my cleaning supplies for my kitchen and my bathroom and getting rid of all of the chemicals that were in my house. And the deeper I get into this, I realize, oh my gosh, this extends beyond just what's in my house. This extends out into what's in my yard. This extends out to the food that I'm buying and the toxins that are used to help produce that food. This extends out to the air that I breathe. And then as you go deeper into the rabbit hole, you realize, oh my gosh, our planet is in a crisis right now. We're having issues with bees that pollinate the food that we eat dying off in huge, huge numbers. We're having issues with plastics in our oceans and overfishing. And the UN just released a report that said that in 40 years, the nutrients are going to be completely depleted from our soil, which obviously is going to affect our ability to get healthy, nutritious food. So what's happening with our planet is really scary. And there's a lot that I can do, to clean up my home environment, to buy organic. But there's an even bigger conversation that we need to be having about what's going on our planet and what are we doing not only to take care of the Earth's resources, but how are we personally interacting with these resources? We talk a lot about this thing called forest bathing, where we talk about how important it is to get out in nature and what it can do for our bodies and our souls to especially reduce stress, but also help us to be breathing really good, purified air, because we're in places where we've got so much green and trees that are like cleaning up what's going into our lungs. So I'm really excited about the conversation I'm going to have today with Dr. J. Wallace and the project that he started that's kind of steeped in his own story around basically loving the earth and loving our oceans. So thank you so much, Jay, for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to join you. And what a great introduction. It sort of summarizes everything, right? The toxicity that's in our planet and ourselves, and how do we address it?
Yeah.
And how do we fix some of these problems? And I think we can. That's the good news, I guess.
Yeah.
Hopefully spell out a little bit here.
Yeah, I love it. Well, this is obviously something that is really, really relevant to all of us because especially as women, our biology is so sensitive to what's happening in our environment. These toxins that we are taking in, we're breathing in, we're putting on our skin, we're eating, break our bodies down and make us very, very sick. And the women in the Healing Rosie community, a lot of us are dealing with hormone dysfunction that comes in part from our environment. So this is going to be a really awesome conversation and really relevant to what all of us are experiencing as we try to really optimize our health and reverse disease and just be the very best version of ourselves that we can. So let's just open this up with this idea of blue mind. What is blue mind and what is red mind?
Well, so it's a really simple term to explain very complex interactions, but let's start with red mind. So red mind is what you just described. Red mind is our crisis mode. Red mind is our anxiety and our stress compounded by our empathy for each other, ourselves, and our planet that just makes us even more stressed out. Then you add in technology. We've all got like a supercomputer in our pocket and many screens around us all day long. We have 24/7 news cycle. We have social and economic stressors on ourselves personally, but then at the macro level, we're worried about the future. We're worried about 12 years from now on climate change, 40 years from now in the soil, the extinction crisis, and maybe crime in our town that used to be a safer place. We're just going right on down the list. This is normal. This is the new normal of being a human being in 2019. Contrast that to blue mind. Blue mind is when you step away from the screens, you log out, you calm your mind, you calm your body, and you get back to yourself. You get back to that part of you that you love the most. And I've found that water is the on-ramp to that blue mind mode. It can be music. It can be just hanging out, talking with a friend. It can be art. There are lots of ways that you can achieve blue mind. You can do meditation. But if you involve water as well as all those other things, it's better. So the music is better when you're sitting on the dock by the bay, as it says in the song.
Yeah.
Or as Bruce Springsteen would say, down the shore, everything's all right. This song he sings, Jersey Girl, right? So blue mind is this mildly meditative state that helps us deal with the new normal called red mind, that gets us out of that anxious mode, out of that fight or flight mode, out of that do, go, go, go mode, and just calms us. And it's not an off switch. It's a different kind of on switch. It's a reset button that makes you more creative, makes you more empathetic for yourself, for the people around you, for the planet we live on. It sometimes even makes people more productive, ironically, when they're in that blue mind mode, or at least when they toggle back and forth between red and blue. And then the third part is gray mind. And gray mind is if you're stuck in red mind too long, you burn out. You will burn out, I promise you. If you haven't already experienced that, you will. If you think you can maintain red mind for many years in a row, I think you'll agree with this. You can't. Yeah. And gray mind is just pretty useless. Red mind is useful, but you have to get out of it regularly into blue mind. Gray mind is nearly pointless. It's depressed, despondent, disconnected, completely unproductive, not your best self. There's not a lot good about it. So we don't want to stay in red mind too long. It'll turn to ashes of gray mind. So blue mind is just, relaxing, I guess is another term for it. But the thing this conversation brings to it is the insight that water in all of its forms, in all of its depictions, even virtual water, the recorded sound of water, a piece of artwork, a photograph, can switch you into this more relaxed mode. And once we know that basic idea, we can start to change our surroundings. We can put some art that we love on the walls. We can prioritize, say, a trip to the water, bath time, shower time, pool time, right down the list, whatever your water is. So that's kind of the quick summary. We got into some of the red mind there, but the best way to understand blue mind is to start with red mind, for sure.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how did you, I know that you have a love for water and that your career kind of started out with water, but you obviously connected the dots between a lot of different things and it's turned into this mission. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so my background is, I'm a marine biologist. So I've studied the ocean. I've studied sea turtles. Turns out when you work with sea turtles, you connect to all of those things you mentioned, the pollution, climate change, the runoff, the toxins. Sea turtles are getting hit by all of that. So they're an interesting group of animals. They're a window into kind of, the global ocean crisis, or the environmental crisis. And I love turtles and have done everything I can to help them and to study them. And in that process, I noticed that there was this big piece being left out. So when we talk about the value of a healthy ocean or healthy planet or healthy lake or river, we usually focus on the ecological and economic benefits, but not the emotional benefits. And it turns out for me in my own life, the emotional benefits of being by the water, hanging out with a turtle while snorkeling have been enormous. The best moments, really the best, most inspiring moments of my life, I would say, involve water, both personally, alone, but also with my friends and family. And I wondered why we discount that so much professionally, formally. And so I went looking around for a book about your brain on water. And kind of like Oliver Sacks has a book about your brain on music. And there are books about your brain on happiness or stress. Go right on down the list. And I couldn't find it. Didn't exist. So I knew it had to be written. So I tried to convince some really smart people that they should write it. And I failed at that. And one day I pitched it to Oliver Sacks, who has written many books about the brain that I love. And he said, "That's a fine idea. You do it." And I said, "Ooh, crap." I think because I have so much respect for him. He passed away a few years ago. Had so much respect for him that it wasn't a suggestion. It was a commandment. Mm-hmm. And so I took that project on, and 5 years after he dictated that I write it, it was published. So that's kind of the path that got to writing the book. But then I realized, okay, I've got a book. That doesn't mean anything unless people read it. And not that many people read 300-page nonfiction books about your brain on water. So I recognized that we needed conversations like this to reach people who aren't going to read my book ever. They might read the front cover. That's about it. And then making this film that we've worked on, and using social media and getting articles into magazines and so on. So it's sort of, the book sort of has spread out, kind of has grown into a Blue Mind movement, you could say. And I don't use that word lightly, the word movement. I use it in the old-fashioned way, that you don't get to call something a movement until you've been doing it 10 years.
Right.
And 10 years into this project, we've got a Blue Mind movement, for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So a lot of your work kind of addresses the mental health aspect of humanity and living, and what we're all experiencing as we probably find ourselves in red mind, as you so eloquently put it, more than we'd like. Why don't you talk about Blue Mind's impact on our mental health, depression, anxiety, and things of that nature?
Yeah, when we look around our own lives, and when we look around the news and the lives of those around us, you can see that modern humans have so much convenience, and we should be the happiest group of people ever, really. Like, you press a button and water comes out, you press a button and they deliver food, you press a button and you video chat your grandma. I mean, geez, that's like the Jetsons, right?
Yeah.
Our cars don't break down nearly as much as they used to, and right on down the list of conveniences. But we're not happy. There's this level of loneliness. There's a level of anxiety and stress and depression it's a plague. We can go into that, but it's so saddening. Young people, adults, elderly, seniors are feeling it, and there's a need for something to help us out. Our spiritual health has suffered as a result of all this anxiety. Mm-hmm. And we're not taught the ways to heal that. So we make decisions, we make bad decisions, we make bad choices, and we consume things that make us feel better for a moment, to give us a dopamine rush, but make things worse in the long run. So that's why we have an opioid crisis, and whether it's drugs and alcohol or other addictive behaviors that, they're an escape, but they're not really. Binge watching TV for 3 days straight. And so it makes us less healthy. And then at the end of the day, it makes us more anxious and more sad. Mm-hmm. And into that kind of ball of red mind and gray mind, we show up with this message that, hey, just get in the water. Trust me on this. And if you're listening to this right now, trust me on this. The question is, what's your water? You tell me what your water is, and then prioritize it, get in it. So if your answer is your bathtub, how many times have you taken a bath this week? I hope at least once, but let's double that. Mm-hmm. Lock the door, bring a candle in there, put on the sound of the ocean or a creek on a device out of a speaker. No screens, please. And enjoy your bathtub. If your answer is a lake or a river or a beach, an ocean, go there, right? Go there. Maybe it's a fountain downtown in your city that you just love sitting by. Take your friend and go sit by it and have an hour-long chat. Catch up. Just go spend time near, in, on, or underwater. And I promise you it'll be an hour or more well spent. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of we do have kind of an emotional crisis going on as well, along with this environmental crisis. But when we understand that our waterways are medicine, and they may be our best medicine, then we'll value them more. And then the efforts to protect them and restore them will increase, I believe. When we realize that veterans and first responders, one of the best things they can do for their post-traumatic stress is get to the water, go surfing, paddling, fishing, walking by the water, swimming, floating. It really is one of the best things they can do. Then that water becomes medicine for the people who need it most, the people who serve us. That's pretty cool, and potentially a regenerative loop, feedback loop. Mm-hmm. It turns out that water is also good for every single one of us. And we're all carrying some level of post-traumatic stress from something. That's a fact. Whether you realize it or name it that or not, you're carrying that. But you reminded me that there's this other kind of regenerative feedback loop, that if the water is downstream from all of these toxins. It is down, everything we put on our body, everything we put down the drain, all of our land-based commerce goes downstream to our lakes, rivers, and oceans. It does. You flush the toilet, you drain the sink, anything in the air falls into the water. That's where it all ends up. And if that water is our medicine and we're polluting it, we're basically taking away our medicine chest. Yeah. The healthiest, best, most natural medicine we have. So when we restore that water, when we clean it up, stop those pollutants from going into it, things get better in a number of ways, ecologically, but also emotionally. And we've seen that around the world where cities have fixed up their rivers that run through their downtown. And when they do that, there's an economic resurgence. There's an ecological resurgence. But I think the most beautiful thing is the emotional resurgence. People start to love their downtown. They go and they hang out by the river and they smooch. And they love that. And they hang out there and talk to their friends. And they go there at the end of a long day and they get restored. Or they mourn, they grieve by the water when they've lost someone or the end of a relationship. That's an enormous emotional resource that we almost don't even have the language to talk about until now. And that's what Blue Mind is. It gives us a name for that. So when you say, I got to go get my Blue Mind on, I would say, yes, you do. I understand exactly what you're talking about. You go do that, sister, and don't worry, I'll be here waiting when you get back. Yeah. And there's our goal is to make that common knowledge and common language and well respected among health practitioners, educators, parents, and so forth.
So when you were doing all the research, I mean, obviously I'm just thinking of how I might feel if I had this idea, sprung it on someone and they were like, you write it. And then I'm feeling this, huge responsibility. I would imagine that there's a lot of things that you began researching and studying that were really illuminating, blowing your own mind. I'd be curious to learn what some of those things were. What did you discover as you started doing the research that has kind of led to this movement?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with, this isn't really where you were headed there, but one of the things that I recently have recognized is that responsibility that was put on me, I've shared it, of course, or a lot of people working in this space, but I was unprepared for the weight of it. I was studying turtles in the ocean and I was pretty happy with that. I was completely unprepared for, I might fall apart here a little bit, but the pain that so many people I meet are experiencing, the stories, of healing or the opposite of healing, of illness and disease and disorder. Personally, I didn't have the equipment on board at a book signing to take on heavy stuff, really.
Yeah.
And you know this well because this is your realm. And I, this year, have needed to step back and sort of felt myself going into gray mind. I mean, I wrote the book, the damn book about blue mind, and I'm feeling I'm sinking into gray mind.
Yeah.
And so that, it was illuminating. Like, wow, there's so much need. We're over here, and we could be over here. And I see it. I haven't met a single person in 5 years, 10 years now, who has said, yeah, I got enough blue mind. I could use a little more red mind. Or, hey, give me some gray mind. I got too much blue mind.
Yeah.
0 people, none have said that. Everybody is carrying a bag of rocks that feels too heavy and too uncomfortable. Everybody. And when you open yourself up to listen to those stories and actually empathize, it can beat you up. And so just as a friend to people, that's something that we all need to realize, that when you are an empathetic person and you are helping and you are a healer, and you've taken that role on, take care of yourself. And so that's where I am right now. I'm in a take care of myself mode so that I can continue to help take care and share this message.
Yeah.
So that's not really where your question was aiming, but that's the first thing that came to mind is that. But the research is so cool. The amount of studies, the number of studies, the amount of research that just keeps pointing in the same direction as the thesis of my book. Studies of float therapy, float spas, people dealing with debilitating anxiety and stress go and float in water in these sensory deprivation chambers, which is I would call extreme blue mind. The results of those studies, clinical research, are awesome. And the researchers will be very careful to not exaggerate and not toot their own horn, but I can toot their horn. And it is really cool and potentially transformative of how we build hospitals, even in therapy centers. Every hospital should have a pool, a warm pool. Imagine that. And if when you find a hospital with a pool and you go visit it, you'll find patients dealing with physical and emotional health issues in the pool. And a friend in Israel who built a pool in her hospital, and she's in charge of it. And at any point during the day, you'll see a line of wheelchairs at the edge of the pool and a bunch of people moving around in the water who couldn't move on land.
Yeah.
And the first thing she did is she got all of the doctors and nurses in the pool and said, how do you feel? And they explained how they felt. And they said, right, you're a healthy, productive healthcare professional, and this makes you feel better. Imagine what it can do for your patients. So, it's simple things like that. These insights, I think, the research is interesting, but what's most interesting is the action and how, in your hands, how does this information get put into action?
Yeah.
So that's exciting. It's happening.
I've actually done a float tank. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you've experienced it too. I remember, so for those of you that don't know what the sensory deprivation floating thing is, you're basically in about a foot of water and there's a ton of salt. And it helps you just to float in the water, and you go in for an hour. So I remember the first time they had me rinse off, get inside, and I'm like laying down and I'm like, I'm just going to lay in here for an hour. Like the idea of that was like, I'm going to be bored out of my mind for an hour. Like, I don't know if I can make it an hour. And it was the most supernatural experience. I felt like I was in outer space. I mean, I've never experienced anything quite like that before. I mean, just the ultimate peace and tranquility. I mean, my mind, I had monkey mind for a while, and then at some point it just stopped.
Yeah.
Like there was nothing going through my mind. And I mean, I think that's one of the big benefits of the distressing, right? De-stressing that you feel doing a float tank. I have a friend who has ADD, and one of her favorite things to cope with how her mind goes is to float. She will go, and for her, she describes it as sorting out everything that's in her mind, like untangling everything that's in her mind so that things can process through fully and then, leave her with peace. She loves it. So it's very, very powerful. I would encourage everyone to experiment with floating. You can often find Groupons for it. Right. And there's all different kinds of float tanks. I haven't done the pod. I know there's these pods that you can float in, but I've done the ones that are like, an 8x8 or 10x10 almost room with water. Yeah, which was really fun.
I agree. I support everything you just said, and I would advise people to sign up for 3 sessions, because for some people that first session you do deal with the monkey mind, and you're looping, and then the second session you're like, oh, I know how this works.
Right, your brain, right?
And and there's the first session you're like, what am I doing here? This is weird. And where's my wallet, or I don't know, just other stuff. And then the second session, you're like, okay, I know how this works. I liked it last time. And then the third session, you're just a pro. And then you really figure out whether is this for you or not.
Yeah.
Most of the centers will give you a 3 float package deal, introductory, whatever. Just ask for it. Ask for the Blue Mind discount. Just see what they say.
Yeah.
Bring a copy of my book and leave it there, and they'll probably give you a super good deal.
Yeah.
But I agree. It's the most nothing you've ever experienced, which turns out to be
something.
a big deal, really a big deal. Yeah. In this world of red mind and distraction, and a lot of times when we feel overwhelmed, we just go and do something that's even more overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Like we crank the radio and we go for a drive.
Yeah.
Right. And that, sure, if that works for you, but that's not giving you what that float session gives you. That's not giving you blue mind.
Yeah.
It's not giving you back bandwidth that you really need to sort things out and to process. And you just remind yourself, who are you? Mm-hmm. What are you doing here and why? And everybody needs that. And it's interesting. We're in the middle of the NBA playoffs right now, and our local team, the Warriors, are going to the finals again, 5th year in a row. Steph Curry, who's one of the stars of the team, he floats weekly, and he says it's what keeps him calm, centered, and makes him a warrior. So it isn't just about being a hippy dippy, peace, love, and happiness, I don't care person and going and floating. He gets out of his float and he goes and he wins NBA championships and hits shots that you think are impossible and keeps his cool. So that's part of it. That's red mind. Like on the court, it's performance. It's go time. He's processing an incredible amount of information. Yeah. And coordinating all of the muscles in his body. So his brain's working hard, not to mention, 25,000 screaming fans. Mm-hmm. And if that's what your job is like, and for a lot of people it's somewhat like that, you better find a place to unplug and get restored. And he does float therapy, and Klay Thompson, who's another player, jumps in the ocean. There's recently a report on ESPN. His reset button is jumping in the Pacific Ocean, literally. And he goes off on that. He actually was in the ocean on Earth Day, and then he came back and had a better game. So it's real, and the best athletes and some of the best thinkers and most creative people are using Blue Mind to do what they do better. And so whether it's floating in a tank or jumping in the ocean or fishing on a river or walking along a path by the water or prioritizing your bath time, super important. Yeah.
All of it. All of it. I'm thinking about my partner Roderick. He's from California, and when we first started dating, he said he knew pretty early on that he was going to be moving to Austin, and the hardest thing for him was being away from the water. And even though he doesn't love being in the water, I think there's something about the deeper water, especially, that is a little bit triggering for him. But just being close to it, you know, I'm fortunate to live in a city where floating down the river is really popular. In Austin here, we have rivers that have 65 to 70 degree water year round. So when it's 110 degrees outside, the water is 70 degrees, which is really fantastic. Yeah. So, you know, I find myself so drawn to that, and I take a bath every day. Like, I'm listening to everything you're saying and how you're putting it together, and it feels so resonant because water is incredibly restorative. One of the most popular, I guess you could say, or well-known athletes in the ancestral health space is Ben Greenfield. And one of the things that he learned earlier in his career, probably, I want to say this was probably 6 or 7 years ago, he's this really high performing athlete. You know, he had his labs run and all his labs were crap. You know, his numbers looked terrible. So even though his body was performing, his biomarkers did not look good at all. And he learned as he started digging into that more, because he wanted a career to go 10, 20, 30 more years. And he was in his early 30s at this time. He started learning how important it is that when you're putting a lot of stress on your body with athletic performance, you know, you're going out there and training, it's so important that you get the adequate amount of restoration before you go out and do it again. You can't just go out there and hard charge all the time and expect your body to continue to be able to play at the level that you're playing. So he actually spends hours a day sleeping, taking naps. He monitors his heart rate variability to see, you know, what's actually happening. Is his body fully restoring? It's so important to our productivity and to us being able to play at a high level. And it's not talked about nearly enough. We don't put nearly enough emphasis on it. And it really is the key to being able to create the life that we want, live the life that we're living, give to the people that we care about, you know, heal from the inside out. It's hugely, hugely important. So I'm so grateful that you're making it your mission to take this message to the world, Jay. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit about the docuseries that you have coming up called Blue Mind Health.
Yeah. So, you know, mentioned that I wrote this book, but in realizing that a lot of people just aren't going to read a big nonfiction book about your brain, but they will watch a docuseries about it. And so, wherever you are in the world, wherever, you know, you mentioned Austin, it's one of the most blue-minded cities in the country, really, but it's inland. It's not near an ocean. That doesn't matter. It's, you know, Barton Springs, you have float spas, you got, the rivers and lakes, very, very active aquatic community far from the coast. So this is a message for everyone. This is a series for everyone, no matter where you are. This is not a coastal thing. It's not a Great Lakes thing only. It's an everyone thing. And we've basically taken the main thesis and research in the book and made it more accessible in this 7-part series. And we brought in my colleagues at Force Blue, and they're a group of special forces veterans, many of whom are carrying heavy loads, post-traumatic stress. And what they've decided to do is repurpose their scuba diving skills that they used in the military to save coral reefs. And so while they're saving the coral reefs, they're actually taking care of themselves. So they're restoring coral reefs and restoring themselves and each other. And by the way, their families, because if you understand post-traumatic stress, you know that it's not an individual disorder. It's a family disorder. And so if you're carrying that, it's felt by all your friends and family. Right. So while they're restoring their reefs, they're restoring themselves and their families and their social networks. Fascinating story. So that's 2 of the episodes connect the dots between Blue Mind and Force Blue and just show it in action, how this self-restoration based on water also helps us restore the water, the integrity, the ecological integrity. So it's a 7-part series. It sort of unpacks very much this conversation that we're having right now, but in a stretched out and more in-depth format, beautifully produced, and it's free. So if you sign up on bluemindhealth.com, you'll get the notifications of when you can watch each episode for free. And if you get a free ebook on Red Mind and Blue Mind. So if this conversation made sense, that you're feeling like you're carrying a lot of red mind and you don't want to carry so much, that ebook will be really useful. And sign up and join us. It's really, you'll hear my voice a little more, and meet Forrest Blue and Celine Cousteau is involved, and a number of other just incredible people. So join us. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I've got a link here for you guys to go sign up for this awesome docu-series. If you're watching on Facebook, it'll be right in the status. And if you're watching this on YouTube, it's down in the description. And Jay, I'm so grateful that you took some time to share your awesome vision with us and help us all to kind of reacquaint ourselves to the part of us that needs to be restored and rejuvenated, and an awesome tool we have to make that really easy and accessible. So,
yeah, well, thank you. And enjoy Barton Springs this summer.
Yes.
And your cool water there in Austin.
That's right. I definitely will do that. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
All right.